Something feels off. Not wrong exactly, just off. You can't quite name it, but you notice you've started hesitating before making simple decisions. You replay conversations in your head. You catch yourself editing what you're about to say, before the other person even reacts. And somewhere along the way, without a single dramatic moment, you stopped feeling like yourself. That's where this begins. We use the word control freak, like it's obvious, like we all know what it means and what it looks like. Someone who micromanages, someone who corrects everything, someone who always has to have it done their way. From the outside, it reads as confidence, maybe even arrogance, and the easy assumption is that they like being in control, that it gives them a sense of power. But that assumption misses something important, because real power, actual psychological security, doesn't need to grip anything. Real security is flexible. It can tolerate ambiguity. It can let things be imperfect and not spiral. What you're looking at when you see someone who needs to control everything isn't strength. It's the appearance of strength, built on top of something much more fragile. Extreme control is not a sign of dominance. It's a sign of internal instability. To understand what's actually happening inside a controlling person, you have to follow the anxiety, not the behavior, because the behavior is just what's visible. The checking, the correcting, the step-by-step instructions, the need to be copied on every email. That's all surface. Underneath it, there's a mind that doesn't rest, a nervous system that scans constantly. Not out of curiosity, out of vigilance. If I don't double-check this, something might go wrong. If something goes wrong, it will be my fault. And if it's my fault, I'll have to face the consequences alone. That's the loop. It's not about the task. It's not about you. It's about what the task represents: uncertainty, risk, the possibility of failure. And for someone wired this way, that possibility doesn't just register intellectually, it registers physically. Tight chest, restless thoughts, a low-grade sense of urgency that never fully disappears. Relaxing doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a threat, because relaxing means letting go. And letting go for them feels genuinely dangerous. So they step in. They fix it. They take over. Not because they think you can't handle it, but because their nervous system doesn't trust the unknown. The controlling behavior isn't about you at all. It's about them, trying to regulate something on the inside. But here's what most people never notice. They're just as trapped as you are. Beneath the need to control, there are three things quietly driving it: anxiety, shame, and a desperate need for certainty. The anxiety we've already touched, but the shame runs deeper, and it's the part that's rarely talked about. It's a quiet internal belief that says, if I mess this up, it means something about me. Not just that the situation failed, but that I failed. That I'm not capable, not good enough, not worthy of being trusted. And when mistakes feel like a threat to your identity, perfection stops being optional. It becomes necessary, a form of self-protection. And that's where the need for certainty comes in. Control creates the illusion of certainty. If everything is planned, checked, reviewed, and done correctly, then nothing bad can happen. No surprises, no judgment, no exposure. The brain mistakes that sense of order for safety, and for a moment it actually works. The anxiety drops, the uncertainty disappears. Everything feels contained and predictable. That moment of relief is powerful, and the brain learns quickly, do this again. And this is where the confusion begins, because what started as a coping mechanism slowly becomes a dependency. They're no longer choosing control, they need it. And the more they rely on it, the less tolerance they develop for anything unpredictable. Small disruptions start to feel overwhelming. Minor mistakes feel catastrophic. Their world becomes smaller, tighter, more exhausting to maintain. So even though control feels like safety, it quietly takes that safety away. No one is born needing to control everything. This pattern is learned, gradually, often long before the person can consciously remember it. Imagine growing up in an environment where things felt unpredictable. Not necessarily dramatic, maybe no single traumatic event, but the adults around you were emotionally inconsistent, warm one moment, distant or tense the next. There was a low-level instability in the background, arguments, uncertainty, that feeling that something could shift at any moment. A child in that environment doesn't have the power to change what's happening around them, but they adapt. They become hyper-aware. They start reading every shift in tone, every micro-expression, every subtle signal, and without knowing it, they learn. If I stay alert and prepared, I can prevent something bad from happening. Control becomes a form of safety when the environment didn't provide one. But sometimes the story looks completely different on the surface. Some people grow up in environments that were overly controlled, strict rules, high expectations, no room for mistakes, no space to make their own choices or figure things out through failure. And in those homes, love can feel conditional, something you earn by getting things right. Over time, a belief forms: if I'm not perfect, I won't be accepted. Control becomes a way to avoid rejection. There's also something else that rarely gets acknowledged: moments of sudden loss, a betrayal, a time when something fell apart and no one was there to help process it. The brain records those experiences. It creates a rule: losing control leads to pain. And from that point on, it does everything it can to make sure that never happens again. What you're looking at in a controlling adult isn't just a personality type, it's a survival strategy, built early, reinforced over time, and never fully questioned. Now let's look at where this actually shows up, because it rarely announces itself. At work, it looks like micromanagement. A manager who needs to be on every email, who rewrites your sentences, who checks in before you've even had a chance to start. It never feels like it's about the work. And it isn't. It's about the anxiety behind it. In relationships, it gets more personal. It shows up as constant check-ins, needing to know where you are, what you're doing, who you're with. Advice that slowly turns into direction. Direction that slowly turns into expectation. And eventually, it stops feeling like care. It starts feeling like pressure, like you're always slightly under evaluation. In everyday life, it hides in over-planning, getting irritated when things don't go exactly as expected, feeling disproportionately stressed over small disruptions, a schedule that changes, a plan that shifts, something slightly out of order, because it's never really about the small thing. It's about what the small thing represents: the loss of predictability, the possibility that something, anything, is outside their control. It doesn't look dramatic, but it changes everything. And here's how the cycle actually runs. Something minor shifts, a plan changes, a detail feels uncertain. On the surface, it's small, but internally, it triggers something much bigger. The mind starts scanning. What if this goes wrong? What if I miss something? The anxiety builds quickly, and there's this urgent need to do something, to regain a sense of stability. So, they act, they step in, they correct, they tighten their grip, and for a moment, it works. Order restored. Anxiety drops. But then comes the consequence. The people around them start to feel it. The pressure, the constant presence, the unspoken message that you can't be trusted to figure it out yourself. And naturally, they respond. They pull back, they disengage, they become quieter, less open. And that distance, that resistance, registers as something slipping out of control. The anxiety returns, stronger this time. Now it's not just about the situation, it's about the relationship, the tension, the emotional gap that's forming. So they respond the only way they know how. They control more. The tighter the grip, the faster everything slips away. And over time, this loop doesn't just strain situations. It slowly erodes the very things they were trying to protect. Trust, connection, closeness, not because they wanted to destroy them, but because control quietly replaced the thing that actually builds them. There's a shift that happens, almost imperceptibly, in the people living closest to someone who controls everything. At first you adjust, you tell yourself it's minor, you accommodate, you find workarounds, you edit yourself a little here, a little there. But then you notice you've stopped sharing certain things, not because you decided to, but because somewhere in your body you learned it wasn't worth it. Every choice felt monitored, every action felt evaluated, and gradually you stopped showing up fully. Not out of rebellion, out of exhaustion. And this is what control ultimately costs. Not the arguments, not the big dramatic ruptures, but the slow disappearance of genuine presence. The way people stop bringing their full selves into the room. There's a version of this that lives entirely on the inside. Some people don't control others at all. They control themselves. They control their environment. They control their schedule down to the minute. They plan for every contingency. They rehearse conversations before they happen and debrief them after. It looks like discipline. It looks like high functioning. And sometimes it is. But there's a version of it that's running on fear, where the structure isn't freedom, it's a wall. Where the planning isn't excitement, it's prevention. Where the appearance of being in control is the only thing standing between them and a feeling they've never fully allowed themselves to feel. That's not living. That's managing. Here's the thing that tends to get lost in all of this. The person who needs to control everything, the one who exhausts the people around them, who rewrites the email, who can't let the plan change, who watches everything too closely, that person is not having a good time. They are working, constantly, carrying a weight that never fully sets down. Their version of safety requires constant maintenance, and no matter how much they control, there's always more uncertainty just outside their reach. So the relief never lasts. The calm is always temporary. And underneath the surface of someone who always seems to have it together, there is often someone who hasn't rested in years. The need to control everything is not a personality flaw. It's not a power trip. It's not dominance. It's a very old answer to a very old question. How do I stay safe in a world that once felt unsafe? Control was the answer the nervous system found, and it worked. Once. In the environment that created it. But most people are still carrying that answer into rooms where the original threat no longer exists. And that's the quiet tragedy of it. Not the arguments, not the micromanagement, not even the damaged relationships. It's that someone has been bracing for an impact that already happened, long ago, and no one ever told them it was okay to put it down.